Hi, and welcome to this interview with Robin. This is Peter Russell from Writing Doctor, and today I'm joined with Robin Waite from Fearless Business Coaching, best-selling author. Take your shot, and also appears in the foreword for our book, How to Write Your Best Business Book. So, Robin, it's a very brief intro there, but do you want to introduce yourself and tell people your
Yeah, of
background?
course. You missed two very important words. International best-selling author, multiple international best-selling author, I should add. A very brief intro, because obviously this is more about inspiring others to write their books for their business, obviously. So I'm a business coach, been doing it now for 10 years. Prior to that, I ran a marketing agency for 12 years and sold that in 2016. Most of the clients that I get to work with these days are sort of small one-person businesses, coaches, consultants, freelancers. A lot of people who would actually benefit from writing a book potentially, as a tool to market their business. So my happy place is sort of having conversations about productizing services, pricing, money mindset, and those sorts of things. But yeah, I'm a 22-year business veteran now with six, soon to be seven books under my belt.
And Take Your Shot, that was the first one, 2017. So what's that journey been like from thinking about having a book out there, being an author, and then turning that into a business asset? What was that like?
Yeah, well, Take Your Shot was actually my first self-published book. So I worked with a hybrid publisher on another book prior to that, so called Online Business Startup. Probably like Take Your Shot, I'm best known for, but Online Business Startup actually did extremely well. It was, I think it sold somewhere in the order of about 25,000 copies. It was a bestseller in the small business and entrepreneurship category on Amazon for the best part of 2.5 years. So, sitting up there in the top sort of three books alongside Daniel Priestley and a couple of other well-known authors for a good period of time. I think Dan always has a lovely quote, which is, the book which changes your life isn't the one you read, it's the one you write. And I would say between Online Business Startup and Take Your Shot, that's definitely true. I think the books have just been one of the best sort of leverage tools that I've been able to use as a marketing asset to be able to grow my own personal brand, to educate people about what it is that I help clients with, and ultimately to go on to then create clients from it.
Well, and how have you used that book? Because I mean, a lot of people use their book and they think, right, I'm going to make a load of money from the royalties, etc. But how have you actually used that book as your sort of business asset there?
Yeah, royalties. It's a bit of a. Back in the day, you could get a traditional publishing sort of deal, and they would give you an advance, depending on how good I guess the pitch was for the book. These days, I guess what they're really interested in is if you've got 100,000 or 1 million subscribers, followers, whatever on your social media channels. So if you've got pre-packaged audiences that they can then you can launch your book into, you might be lucky if you get a royalty. I'm looking at the likes of Ali Abdaal, for example, who got 2 6-figure book deals, off the back of his, well, now 6 7 million subscribers on YouTube. So kind of gives you an idea about what presence you've got to have. So I'm not fortunate enough to have those big audiences like those guys have got. And as such, my royalties therefore are a lot smaller because I've self-published a majority of my books, worked with a hybrid publisher on the first one, and you're talking like pennies or a couple of pounds a book or something like that. I probably make royalty-wise, I don't know, £400 or £500 a month. And I guess once the book's written, it's relatively passive. And an interesting factoid is that I make more royalties from my audiobooks from those two books than the Kindle and paperback combined. So actually, it's really beneficial to get all three media, recorded and out there live, so people have multiple different ways to kind of engage with your content. I was very fortunate in 2023 to be a guest on Ali Abdaal's podcast, the Deep Dive podcast, and it just absolutely catapulted my business into the stratosphere over the past 2 years. So a couple of statistics for you, which I think will blow people's minds. So the first one is that when I was doing sort of marketing the old-fashioned way, doing social media and long and short form videos and blogs, all the stuff that the gurus tell you, we're probably spending like 30 plus hours a week just on all of those things. 2023 rolled around and I was like, right, I'm going to double down and focus on my partnerships. I want to find people who've already got audiences that I can leverage and try and get my books in front of their audiences that they've already built. So when I guested on Ali Abdaal's podcast, we ended up, at the end of it, I planned to give away 15 signed copies of the book. Which Ali and I both signed before we then sat down and did the recording. And literally the moment that interview went live on YouTube, those 15 books were gone in like 5 minutes. So, but the requests kept on coming in for signed copies, so I kept sending them out. And so over the first 90 days, I think I sent 1,500 copies of the book. And then within 12 months, I generated something like 3,000 leads. First of all, like the success of that campaign, if you were to call it a campaign, wouldn't have worked without the book. If I didn't have that really highly perceived value-wise, asset, that if people weren't able to request that asset, I wouldn't have been able to generate the leads that I got. If I'd just sent people off to a PDF or to my website or things like that, I think capturing their data would have been very different. But there was just this really just immediate demand for the book. People were just really intrigued by the topic. Obviously, well, hopefully I did a good job on the podcast, and kind of the rest was history, really. And I think in total from that one interview, 3,000 leads generated somewhere in the order of about 45 clients and 250K's worth of new business for my sort of humble little coaching practice. And it made me realise that of all that time that I'd spent doing the guru-esque sort of, social media marketing and 30 plus hours a week, well, the time I invest into my partnerships is only about 2 or 3 hours a week. So you're talking like a tenth of the time, but that only works if you've got the asset. I couldn't sweat the asset. I couldn't sweat the book, if it didn't exist.
How did you leverage your book sort of to become that sort of asset that you could then use for opening those opportunities for podcasts, etc.?
Yeah, it was really straightforward actually. So I just had a very simple data capture form, which I think we built using Jotform. So initially it was name, email address, telephone number, and then at some point in a year or two before that, I said, well, let's start sending out paperback copies. I've got some other interesting statistics around why it works so well with Take Your Shot, which I'll go through in a second, just the costs of it. But yeah, simple data capture form. We added on the option to choose your country and put your address in as well to then be able to send out signed copies. And also one of the things which I did, which I'm not sure whether it works or not, but I give people the option to make a voluntary donation towards postage. So some people are particularly generous. They give lots of, they'll give me £20, £50 even. I've had people offer just for a signed copy of the book. The vast majority don't pay for the postage. But what I've worked out is with the royalties I get through the traditional sort of ways the book is sold, and plus the people who do donate a bit, that my book sales that I give, or the books that I give away, works out roughly cost neutral. So, I'm marketing, I'm giving away 5,000 books a year. So you imagine getting 5,000 leads a year potentially, and it being virtually cost neutral as a marketing campaign. It's really, it works really well. And then, those go into my email sort of list provider, which I use Kit for that, formerly ConvertKit. I get a little email drop in with the person's details, and then you and I've had this discussion. I then have got a little Munbin thermal laser printer. I have somebody who supplies my book mail jackets as well, and then we just send them out. Just take them down to Pauline at the post office. And the amount of people who say to me, like, Robin, why do you do this? Because shouldn't you have a VA doing it, or give it to I take a huge amount, there's some intrinsic value for me. I get a lot of personal value out of just seeing who's ordered the book, writing their name in the book, signing it, taking it down to it's like a physical thing. And I think in this digital world, I think people can really overlook physical assets, physical gifts that you send out to people. One of the other things which I do, which is really worthwhile, is sponsor events. So my goal is to give away 5,000 copies of the book a year. So lead wise, probably now it's died off a little bit since the Ali Abdaal interview, but I'm still getting probably 2,500 leads through, which means that I've still also got to find 2,500 homes for the rest of the books, right? So what I tend to do is I'll sponsor events. If I know there's going to be 100, 200 people, 500 people, 1,000 people there, I'll sponsor an event, and then I'll just ship an advance party, my boxes of books up to be given away in goodie bags and things like that. I know then that that's going to be creating the impact. One of the really interesting things about the books is that there's this lag which takes place. So most people will launch their book, big fanfare, book launch night, we get excited, we get the Amazon bestseller, and then it's like, what next? Crickets, nothing happens, right? It's a massive anticlimax. And I've had this with all of my books, and I kind of don't want to be a spoiler alert for the authors out there, because it's a wonderful thing when you finally give birth to this book, but it is every time it's been a massive anticlimax, and a number of the other authors I've spoken to, it's the same. So what I always recommend to people, first of all, it doesn't just stop after the launch. You've got to do a book review campaign. You've got to be the one out there shouting from the rooftops about your book, getting it into as many people's hands as you possibly can do. But then there is this lagging effect of like you give away 1,000 books and it's not like, oh, tomorrow you get your first lead in. It's like 2, 3, 4 weeks down the line where things then start to trickle through. Because not everybody wants to sit down on the first available Sunday morning and read through your, 2, 3, 5 hours worth of a book that you've written. Not everybody will need the thing that's in your book that you're writing about in that particular moment. Not everybody will have the means, the money to be able to pay for whatever your product or service is in that moment, so therefore they won't inquire. So the great thing is, when you've got all these books out there floating around, advocating for your brand, you just get these lovely random warm messages which drop into your inbox period. Oh my God, I've had people like 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago who I gave the book to, and they're like, Robin, finally picked up your book. I wish I picked it up 5 years ago. And I'm like, I wish you had as well, and it initiates that conversation.
I think there is that sort of thing, isn't there, of understanding that you've given somebody that book. It doesn't mean they're going to go home and read it right away and then going to be in your inbox tomorrow or going to review it the next week. It's going to take that period of time, isn't it, for them to actually sit down, read it and go, oh yeah, I do need to. But so since 2017, you're finding these are sort of happening quite regularly now, are you? These sort of inbound inquiries from people that have read your books? And
Yeah, and not only that as well. I mean, look, what I can be really honest about this, right? Why do we write a book? Okay, so we've got lead gen now, right? Good for business, personal brand, and things like that. But there is also the status thing where now you get the credibility and authority through writing a book. You're a published author. I've found it far easier to get booked for things like speaking engagements and podcast interviews and things like that since I've got now these books coming through. But the one thing which I love, and again, I don't mind admitting this at all, is I love the recognition. I like being able to walk into a room and there are people like, oh my God, you wrote Take Your Shot. And I'm like, I have no idea who you are, but yes, I did. That's me.
they know everything about you.
And then they'll be like, oh, and I saw you on Ali Abdaal's podcast and I saw you. And it's like, I'm ultimately, and I think like 2/3 of the population are introvert. I'm an introvert. So I ran a web design marketing agency because I could sit behind a computer screen and not see anybody for weeks at a time. Never speak to a soul, right? So that all had to shift when I was doing the coaching and speaking and stuff like that. But having the book out there means that I get more inbound than I have to project outbound, if that makes sense. And it's far easier when people come up to me and say, oh, hi, Robin, I read your book, hey. And then they just share, they tell me about their business. So I don't have to make a lot of effort in many respects.
You touched on Ali Abdaal there. You got some other specific examples of how you've used this book and what it's sort of the opportunities that's then presented for you?
Yeah, so I've used it just to open doors up. So I mentioned speaking at events before. So in order to, there's a wonderful sales and marketing conference, Atomicon actually, which is up in Newcastle once a year in June. Several years ago, it was very small. There's only like 200-300 people. I came onto the scene with that event probably 3 years ago when there was 500 people. And they were like, oh, and we had a conversation about would I want to sponsor. I wasn't quite ready to be a speaker there because it's quite a big event and they have quite a selective sort of criteria. So I said, well, what can we do then? Well, you can sponsor, you can do an exhibition stand. I don't want to stand next to a stand like, are you doing goodie bags this year? And like, yeah, we're doing goodie bags, but we might bin them off because we haven't got enough stuff for them. I was like, well, let me sponsor the goodie bags. So I sponsored the goodie bags. I think it wasn't very expensive. It was about £1,500, put 500 books in the goodie bags. So again, all those other touch points. Went to the event, loved it. A few hours after the event finished, I get an email, Robin, do you want to sponsor the goodie bags next year? Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Yeah, why not? So, and then finally, year 3, I get invited to come back and speak, and that's where I start then winning clients. And I'm also now an associate coach on Andrew and Pete's Mavericks program, who run Atomicon. I couldn't have probably built that relationship if I didn't have a substantial marketing asset to be able to put into the goodie bags. And whether I've won any business from that is kind of neither here nor there, because now I've got this wonderful partner in Andrew and Pete. I've built a partnership with Ali Abdaal. I've built a partnership with lots of other sort of YouTubers and sort of moderately famous people in their worlds. Even down to, there's a guy called Chris Doe. I don't know if you've ever come across him. He's quite niche, but he's a YouTuber. He kind of coaches on pricing for design agencies over in the States. He's based in LA. And I went to an event once where he was speaking. We'd met a couple of times beforehand. And a major part of his marketing is based on doing these sort of viral videos where he's like mentoring people live, in these really cool places. So I just said to him, look, I noticed his team, they were filming it or getting the cameras ready, but they couldn't find a mic. And I started walking around with like handheld mics basically in my bag. So, oh, I got a mic. And then I went around his workshop and I was, basically there handing the mic out to people. Uninvited, they didn't ask me to do that. Anyway, long and the short of it is, about 2 hours into this 3-hour workshop, Chris sort of stopped everything. And he went, by the way, a big round of applause for Robin over there. He's been helping out with the microphone. Just to let you know, Robin's got this amazing book called Take Your Shot. And Robin, I'm going to get you onto the podcast soon, but I haven't finished reading the book yet. And he did this big, long thing, and everybody cheered and everything else. And I feel really good because I'm the chosen one, aren't I? In that day. But again, the book was mentioned there. Most of the introductions now, when I meet new people and I'm being introduced, it's, oh, this is Robin. He's an author. He wrote Take Your Shot, or he wrote the Fearless Business Blueprint, or whatever it is. So again, the book comes up as a part of that sort of credibility and authority piece. So it's very powerful. It's kind of like the book precedes, it goes in front of you, if that makes sense, and like as your announcer.
So you mentioned that you use it as like your authority, your credibility. It helps build your personal brand. Are there any other things that sort of the book sort of can do for you and your business?
The main one is just lead gen. It's just people, especially business people, they love a good book, and they're not looking for big, long Tolkien-esque style tomes. They're looking for actionable, practical advice and tips they can implement in their business. And so what I've discovered is the more value you give people in your book, like just give everything away, then the more inviting it is for them to come and want to work with you. I look at the moment, we've currently got 180 members in my sort of accelerator, my business accelerator. We do lifetime access, so that's not like a monthly membership. Anyway, neither here nor there. But every single sales call that I've had and every single client that's come into the program, they always say, I read Take Your Shot and it was brilliant. Right? It might not be the clincher. It might not be the one thing which gets them to come and become a client. But I know it's a really important part of that sort of marketing funnel to squeeze people into giving them enormous amounts of value. And again, Dan Priestley talks about 7-11-4, 7 hours of engagement, 11 touch points, 4 different locations. So for me, the locations is like online, offline, traditional PR, those sorts of things. Engagement is like the amount of time that somebody has to spend engaging with your brand before they commit to making a buying decision, yes or no, actually. And then the 11 is the different touch points which people go through. So the book is just one touch point of many. They might see you on a podcast, meet you at an event, or read your blog, or any number of those different things, but a book is a major part of that. But the book ticks off. Imagine if you've got to spend 7 hours engaging with somebody before they hit the buy button for whatever your product or service is, and your book is 40,000 words and takes the average person 5.5 hours to read. Well, you've just chalked off 5.5 hours out of the 7 hours to build that trust with somebody. So I think that's why the book is probably more powerful than most things. And you couple that then in with a long form podcast interview. So in the case of the Ali Abdal interview, that was 2.5 hours. So they had 2.5 hours of seeing me on talk to Ali, who they already trust, and then 2, 3, 4 hours reading Take Your Shot. So we're off just 2 touch points. We've got most of the engagement nailed. And I think that's kind of the biggest difference. People sit down, they read it, and they go, they can empathize, and they feel like they know you as the author.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it, isn't it? Is putting your personality, your story, and your business into that book, isn't it?
That's it, absolutely.
What are some of the things that you see others making mistakes when they think about putting a book out there, or some of the assumptions that people made, or maybe you made originally about a book and things?
So the main one is, I think, going into their first book without getting any help. There's that age-old saying, "Oh, don't judge a book by its cover." People bloody do, especially business books. If you're serious and they can see that it's DIY, it will put people off. Even down to when you open the book up and you can see that the typeset, the wrong size fonts used, the wrong size line spacing, and it just looks a bit amateur. Consciously or subconsciously, people will be judging you on that. Even down to things like the language which you use in your book. I remember somebody, one of the first iterations of Take Your Shot, so obviously that was my first proper go at self-publishing, was littered with typos. I'll be honest, I'm slightly ashamed to admit it, because I feel like I am a reasonably literate kind of guy. But it was just littered with typos. And I remember the day somebody wrote me an email and said, I was really enjoying it, and then I just got to a part where there were just I couldn't get beyond the mistakes. And I was like, fair enough, I take that on the chin. And so That was the point when I hired a proofreader to go through the book in detail. Is one of the dads actually at school. He went through the book in detail, literally with a red pen, and we fixed everything. I also felt that the cover dated, the original cover which I'd designed. And again, I'm an okay designer, not that good, but it dated. The moment I paid a professional designer to do me an updated version of it, and the version which is there now, which was more in keeping with my brand, colours, style of design, all of a sudden we got better engagement with the book on things like Amazon and other platforms like that. So, and it makes it more memorable. We've actually built like the same sort of style and colours into other books now, so it kind of feels a bit more as a series. So that getting professionals in like yourselves to help with writing, structural edit, making sure it's commercial and stays on track, making sure that there's as few times. Look, you can't write 40,000 words without putting a few mistakes in there. It's just going to happen. But when you spot them, weed them out. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of individuals just aren't technically savvy enough to do a lot of this stuff particularly well. So I'd always recommend first book, go down the route of hybrid. The second mistake is just not bothering to market it. I think a lot of people write the book and they think all of a sudden they're going to be like New York Times bestseller and they won't have to do it. No. The process only starts once the book is live. You've done like probably 10% of the work in actually writing and publishing the book. Like the hard part now is to get to work on marketing it and getting it into as many people's hands as possible. And that never stops. So even the money I make from the book, yeah, okay, I could stop doing any kind of activity and I'd still drip feed a bit of cash passively coming in, but it's not passive. I work bloody hard to get the book in front of people. And also, the next mistake is probably stopping at one book. I think, again, you're hoping that essentially you're going to luck out with a lottery ticket, just by writing one book. Actually, you've probably got to write several as a business owner before, for one or two or whatever, before one of them kind of takes off. And I think as well, like people, maybe it's just my line of work. I don't know. As a business coach, you get a certain amount of credibility from being prolific. So the fact that I can walk into a room having written 7 books tells people something about me. Whether they read the books or not, this guy's written 7 books. The mistake I've made probably is out of those 7 books, two or three were like fairly light lift, cheaty sort of lead magnets. I can't really call them a book. I don't know. But now I've got sort of 3 really solid proper books under my belt. I've got a 4th one underway, which is going through more of the traditional publishing route, which I'm very excited about. It's out in June next year. So the next book is called Fearless Pricing. Now that I've done that with Fearless Pricing, I know now that I've got to raise my standard. I've got to raise the bar. If I write another book, it's got to be up at that sort of level. But again, that only comes through experience. That only comes through having written 6 other books to get to that point, to know that.
Brilliant. Yeah. And I mean, you said that there's so many books out there, isn't there? So you've got to keep going with your book. Otherwise, it is just going to get lost amongst the rest of them. And again, like when it sits on Amazon, it's got to stand out. If you've just sort of cobbled something together and stuck it up there and not really given any thoughts as to how it's going to launch or the marketing side of things, it's just lost amongst everything else that's out there. So if there's a business owner that's looking for getting a book out there for 2026, what would be some of your top tips for them?
Yeah, so first and foremost, like technology is moving faster than ever. So I would actually recommend people to focus on frameworks, not technology, not apps and things like that. One of my first books has aged really badly now because I mentioned a couple of SaaS tools in there, like online apps, and it's just not really relevant anymore. And so I've got to go through the painful process of like removing those. So I'd recommend probably focusing more so on frameworks, like what is the unique IP that you've got that you can share that is going to essentially outlive you potentially, that you can share with your audience. Again, it doesn't have to be a big book. I think writing a book, the thought process of writing a book can put a lot of people off. But a book could be 10,000 words. 15,000 words. It doesn't have to be 40,000 or 50 or 60,000 words. It can be quite short. And then have a go at writing your first chapter. In fact, don't even write it. Narrate it. Dictate it. There's an app called VoicePal now, which again is one of Ali Abdal's apps. Speak into it, and in real time, it uses AI to tidy up your words and turn it into like a well-formatted sort of book, and that can become the first draft that then you hand over to Peter or Nicola, and then they go through the process of kind of making it look professional and neat and well structured. for example. I think, again, people just overthink this and they kind of look at the end, and actually it's just about taking those first couple of steps to get started. And frankly, if you've ever gone out into the world and said, I think I'd like to write a book, and you've not done it yet, I think that's just plain selfish, because I think everybody has like unique knowledge, insights that the world could benefit from, and the best thing you can do with all of that knowledge is just get out there and write the book, even if it ends up just being a legacy play that your kids one day and grandkids go, through your bookshelves and they find a book and they're like, oh, Robin Waite, that was Dad wrote a book, did you? Right? There's something nice in that, about that, knowing that there's something there that will eventually outlive you, I think.
Like, just write the book. So, Robin, thank you very much. Appreciate you got a bit of a cold today, so
Yeah.
appreciate your time. Thank you ever so much for sharing your insights and your journey with your books, numerous books, and another book coming out next year. Thank you very much for taking the time to do the foreword for our book.
My
It's very
pleasure.
much appreciated. For everyone watching, be fearless, take your shot, and get your best book written in 2026. Thank you. Thank you, Robin.
Thank you. Cheers, Peter.